Please tell us who you are and why we're here today.
I'm Kim Taylor-Smith. I'm Deputy Leader of the Council, and we're here to talk about housing and housing management.
The tragedy at Grenfell has started a new debate around the issues of social housing. As a developer yourself, what has driven you to take the responsibility as Deputy Leader of the Council to drive the process of change?
Well, first of all, let me correct you. I'm not a developer. I mean, my business is converting factories into small business units to support small SME companies. In terms of motivation, I've always wanted to ensure that something good comes out of this tragedy. And for me, it's housing and our housing management, because there are lots of things we did as a council well, but housing was not one of them. And I'd like to see our housing and our housing management to be the beacon for the rest of people to judge themselves by.
In your Guardian article on the 3rd of January, you said many organisations and companies in the UK in the housing sector seem to lack some of the core values required to make real differences to people's lives. What did you mean by that, and what core values were you referring to?
Well, clearly there is an attitude out there that people are lucky to have social housing, and that really is something I disagree with. Clearly social housing is provided to the most vulnerable people and people in most need to be given support, and it's quite right that we should do that, and do that as far as the borough is concerned. And I think people need to hang on to that motivation and remember that.
What do you think of this statement from the Shelter Report on the future of social housing, suggesting that we live in a country that is feeling the effects of 40 years of failure in housing policy?
I agree with that. I mean, it's interesting. I was given a copy of this report last week, and I've had a chance to read it, not in great detail. And I think the first thing that I was encouraged by is that there was a lot that was in that report that's already covered in the council response, the green paper to the green paper issued by the government. That covers the issues about holding landlords to account, improvement in terms of the regulatory system on those. Are all things that need to be done. I think the other key part of the report, which again struck a chord with me, is empowering the residents themselves to have greater say in terms of their homes. And that's something that we're obviously doing within, now we have housing management that's come back to us, and we have through our TCC meetings, and we've set up a lot of task and work groups exactly to look at that, look at the issues that are not only contained within the Shelter Report, but I think going beyond that, and I think that's incredibly important. So I think it was a very positive report. I think it touched on the importance of looking at housing beyond council housing stock, and that's something which again we're very keen to see, because ironically there is, and I say ironically because obviously we come from a place where our performance in terms of management housing has been very poor, is that people are actually coming to us and said, could you please take on the management and maintenance of our own homes, because the housing associations themselves are failing, and that's not a good thing. We've set up we're developing a charter with our residents to have a binding contract between us that shows what they can expect from us in terms of a landlord. And what we'll be doing is taking that round our housing associations and getting our housing associations to subscribe to the same values that we want to instill, and these are values that we can judge them by. I think the third element that's in the report was an interesting one, which is one I think with greater debate, is how we start regulating the largest source of accommodation, and that's private housing and private rental. And there, again, there are lots of innovative things that we can think about what we might be able to do. The suggestion in the report is about having some form of register for people having over 25 houses, which I think is something that looks to merit. I think the only thing that we have to be careful of is not over-regulating the private sector, because there are a lot of people that do. It's a very valuable tool as far as the source of housing as far as the council is concerned. We've also got to encourage people to bring it forward. And not to get to a situation whereby tenants are facing eviction and all these other things if we start putting draconian things. But the report is one that I welcome in terms of its general findings.
Can you suggest a way forward in reducing the estimated billions being spent by local authorities on temporary accommodation to private landlords?
Oh, well, I mean, That's an incredibly difficult one. First of all, I mean, the situation that exists in Kensington and Chelsea is not the same as what happens in the rest of the country. I mean, somebody was asking me questions about the issues with our housing and housing provision, and they were talking about what the impact of Brexit might be on housing values. And I answered by saying our average housing price in the Royal Borough is 1.4 million. So the Royal Borough really doesn't, you know, the circumstances for us bears little resemblance to reality. I'll start by saying that. I mean, obviously, in order to address this issue, it comes two ways. One, can you develop additional housing within the borough and at an affordable rate? And there are obviously two constraints on that. First of all, value, because clearly, as I've said, with a very high average house price, site values are very expensive. And secondly, is availability of sites. You know, we are the most densely populated borough in London. And so consequently, where we're looking at where we might have put additional housing, we can't go down anymore because we've stopped the basements beyond one level. So we're now having to look at bulk and massing and height and everything else, which obviously things which are going to cause great concern as far as local residents are concerned. I think where there is an opportunity for us is that with our housing stock and our requirement to obviously improve the quality of that housing stock, we'll be looking very closely with the local residents as to how we might look at infill and how we might look at improvement. You know, clearly regeneration is completely off the cards. That's not something that isn't. So we can look at see how we might be able to address that. I think coming back to your specific question about private rental, one of the things that we are currently drafting is a intermediate key worker rental scheme. You know, because we've got two ends of the spectrum in Kensington and Chelsea. And if I give you an example, I mean, a two-bedroom flat in Chelsea in my ward is £500 a week. You know, a two-bedroom socially rented house will be £130 a week. So what happens to the bit in the middle? And we can see a lot, and I'm a governor of a local school, and it's very difficult for us to attract teachers to that school, you know, because they're having to commute further and further out of London to work. And so we're looking at how we might actually develop a product as an intermediary rental at around about the £250 a week mark for key workers to actually, you know, support people who can then live and work in the borough. And that's something we're working on at the moment. I think as far as the other general private housing is concerned, within our temporary housing, you know, as I say, we have a lot of it which we pay for, and some of it's extremely expensive. And we are looking at how we might police that better than we have done, because again, there's issues that we're finding out already with regard to the standard of some of this TA accommodation. You know, but sadly, for us as a borough, temporary accommodation in terms of cost, the only way we're providing it is a lot of it is having to be provided out of borough, which is obviously not good for the local people. They're having to live quite often, obviously, you know, live away for quite periods of time. But that is a factor really of the cost of of providing it.
Do you think there's an opportunity to learn, not just from our own history, but also from the best of international experiences, from countries such as Singapore, Denmark and Austria, where social housing is considered a natural part of the fabric of society? What would those lessons be moving forward?
Well, I think the short answer to that is yes. And I can give a personal experience in terms of my experience of social housing outside of the UK. And that was when I was a teenager. I had a girlfriend who lived in Holland. And I went to stay with her, and she lived in Utrecht. And if anybody might know where Utrecht is, or in the middle of Utrecht, there's a tower with 400 odd steps called the Dom Tower. And I climbed up to the top of this, and I looked around, and I was looking, and I said, well, where's the expensive part of the town, and where's the poor part of the town? I said, where do the poor people live? And my girlfriend said to me, she said, they live all around. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, our council has a policy of mixed tenure housing. And we've tracked this, and we've demonstrated that clearly the opportunity of mixing people in terms of breaking down social barriers, in terms of improvements of health, well-being, etc., is very positive. And I think that's certainly a message that stuck with me, and it's something I've said at the council meetings before about, you know, learning from other people's experience. And I think going forward, I would like to see very much the opportunity of doing mixed housing rather than big blocks of expensive private and big blocks of social housing is to have that mix. I think what it also does is it breaks down the stereotypical view of a social tenant as well. It gives people greater understanding, gives people greater understanding, not just of that, of diversity of everything, which I think is a very positive thing.
In your speech at the Council Chamber meeting on the 17th of October 2018, you said that you believe that developers in this borough can and must deliver at least 35% truly affordable housing on their developments. Perhaps you could talk about what truly affordable means to you.
Well, I think first of all, let's just talk about the developers. And it's quite interesting to see that as the market has turned down, we've got a number of developers that have consented schemes that have been coming back and saying, listen, can we consider reconfiguring these schemes? And so, and that's given us the opportunity to set down this 35% where we haven't got it in the past, and say, listen, you're going to come back, this is what you're going to have to provide. So I think that's a very positive thing. For me, I'm a great fan of mixed tenure schemes. And I think obviously we have got a large number of people on our housing list for social housing. So clearly that is our priority. And also on certain categories of housing as well. We're very short on the larger units of 3 and 4 bedrooms. And so that's clearly going to be our priority in all future developments. But equally, I think there's an opportunity to look at intermediate rented properties that we could make available for key workers. When I say affordable, I mean the mayoral definition of affordable is 80% of market rate. Well, 80% of market rate in Kensington and Chelsea is not affordable. So for me, it's probably 50% that really we should be looking at, is to provide homes for key workers and people that obviously don't want to suffer commuting for an hour to come in at work. And I think that's an important element of all our future developments. Clearly, all of this is also, finance is quite a factor for us in funding developments, because clearly the income that comes from that development goes to support the borrowing that we will obviously now have to take in order to develop it. So consequently, there is an opportunity there to not, as a benefit of one of the mixing, it gives us the opportunity to finance as well and finance more homes.
In your discussion paper published in October 2018, Solving the Challenge Together, you wrote about a two-way residence charter, setting out the duties and responsibilities of the council and of tenants and leaseholders' duties to each other, including the maintenance and safety of their homes. You went on to talk about setting out a standard of neighbourliness and strong community with the intention of reducing antisocial behaviour. How has this idea been received amongst your residents?
Well, we have a working group on this within one of the subcommittees of the Tenants Consulting Committees looking at this. And it's been well received. Clearly, there are lots of concerns from tenants about the states of repairs, antisocial behaviour. These are all things that obviously affect people in their home. So I think it's important for us as a council to set up our commitment to them, to address the issues that are of concern for them. And we've put in, I think it's rather surprising to a lot of our tenants, penalties against ourselves for failure to respond within a certain time, etc., because we obviously want to be held account to provide an excellent service. And also I want to ensure that we've got a motivation to do so from a monetary point of view. And I think that's been very well received. But equally, it's got to be a two-way street, because not only if we as a council are going to commit to do this and commit to maintain homes to a good standard and invest money into their homes, equally, it's incumbent on that tenant to be a good neighbour and not create noise and nuisance and antisocial behaviour, and also to look after their own homes. We don't want to see vandalism and etc. It is all really about trying to foster a good partnership, I think, as far as us as a council delivering a service to the residents.
How would you suggest that we bring together all political parties to rediscover the previous energy and drive that David Lloyd George first brought to the government policy on social housing?
Well, obviously David Lloyd George was famous for being a Liberal Prime Minister and also being the architect of social housing. I think if we took a specific example in the Royal Borough, we've got a good working relationship with our with the Labour councillors. So there is a cross-party working. We have a Labour councillor chairing the Housing Committee, who attends all the meetings, and a leaseholder herself. And we've set up joint working groups on looking at our new developments, etc. So I think within the borough we recognise on both sides of the party the importance of addressing our acute housing shortage in social and affordable housing will work to it. On a wider national issue, I just hope. I mean, although I'm a conservative. Although I'm a Conservative councillor, I have just earned the nickname of being Comrade Kim, in terms of having what a lot of people see, to be a slightly more radical approach to our housing. But I don't see it that. I mean, I still very much agree with the Conservative ethos of right to buy, because I believe people should be given the opportunity of owning their own home. But on the opposite side, I also, from a more social perspective, worry about the impact that these sort of things have on our stock of social housing. But I think, in simple answer to your question, I would hope that everybody puts down any political differences and concentrates on something which, on both sides of the house, they see as an acute need, especially in London.
Kim Taylor-Smith, thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us.
Thank you very much.